Excuse me. What are your thoughts on the verdict today?
Extremely disappointed.
So there'll be some motions coming?
There'll be some postponed motions filed. We've already started working on them after our first round of questioning answering this morning. And the response the judge had given, we knew that, which we obviously didn't think was right or correct, especially with regard to the first question that was asked, as whether or not it had any legal relevancy as to whether or not Nolan thought the gun was unloaded. Obviously it does, because that's the risk he had to assess. And he was under the understanding that he had just unracked the gun and they lost the bullet in the grass and he was looking for it. His belief was the gun was unloaded at that time. Obviously, pointing a loaded gun and pointing an unloaded gun are two different things. In his mind, he was convinced that it was unloaded, but obviously it wasn't. So, based on that, I think the response the judge had given to the first question was not correct, and as a result of that, I think that was the turning point in this whole case. And it wasn't long after that we came back with a verdict. So,
Disappointed but not surprised. Why not surprised?
because of what happened this morning, just what I just told you, what the judge had read in answering that first question, I don't believe was appropriate. The case law that was relied upon, that was provided by the district attorney, was clearly distinguishable. It involved an adult male who intentionally pointed a gun, and he had no idea whether it was loaded or unloaded. At least in Nolan's case, he had taken action to believe that the gun was unloaded, and therefore the risk that he would have assessed would have been highly different than someone not knowing at all in judging what he was doing when he considered malice.
What
How
would you
is
say to
Nolan
Nolan?
taking this? How is Nolan taking it?
As well as could be expected for a 15-year-old. How do you think he's taking it?
How would
you're
you say
saying that
what would you say to-
before-
Go ahead.
You're saying that before the question came up and was asked to the judge, defense, prosecution about the intention there or the gun being loaded, unloaded. You're saying before then you were confident that this would go in Nolan's favor.
I was confident it was going to go in Nolan's favor until that question got answered. Then my confidence quickly eroded after the answer to that question came out, and I realized that, in our view, it was the wrong answer to give. Clearly, it did have relevance. It did have a lot of legal relevance. In order to find malice, you have to realize that there is a risk, a substantial risk, and you have to evaluate that risk, okay? And in evaluating it, you come to the understanding that, yes, there is a risk, but I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway. That's what malice is, okay? And pointing what he believed to be an unloaded gun was probably reckless, because there's a possibility it was loaded, which is what we had in this particular case. But in his mind, if in fact he intentionally pointed it at him, which I guess they're determining that he did, for whatever reason, based upon what the judge said, that's malice in and of itself, which we don't agree with. And the case is distinguishable. Like I said, it involved an adult who intentionally pointed a gun at somebody for the purpose of scaring them, and the gun went off and killed somebody. And we think that's totally different. That person had no idea, it states in the case law, whether that gun was loaded or unloaded. At least in this case, it's distinguishable because Nolan, based upon his own actions in clearing the gun when they lost the bullet, right before the shooting, when they had to look for it in the grass, believed the gun was cleared, and there was no bullets in the gun. So that's the difference.
What would you say to the families after the verdict?
Which family?
Kain's and Nolan's.
I've already talked to Nolan's family and told them to hang in there, that this isn't over yet. What would I have to say to Kain's family? The same thing I expressed to them earlier. I'm sorry for their loss. And this is a really terrible situation that's deeply affected a lot of people. Not just Kain, not just Nolan, but the circle of friends they had, their family members, everybody that's involved in this case has been deeply affected and adversely affected.
Do you think that Nolan Grove feels remorse today?
Yes, I think he does. I think he absolutely does. He's always been remorseful. I mean, this isn't, like I said, this isn't some stranger he shot. This was his best friend. One of his best friends. And I couldn't even imagine if I, even to this day, at my age, if I had did something that resulted in the death of one of my friends.
Are you going to appeal?
Absolutely.
Are you going to be on the appeal, or is he going to hire any counsel?
Well, for right now, we're going to file post-trial motions and see where that goes, and then we'll ascertain where the appeal goes from there.
Nolan's a 15-year-old juvenile. He's facing a statutory maximum of 20 to 40 years in prison. What do you think policymakers at home should think of this verdict and this case as a whole?
When you say policymakers, you're talking about lawmakers? There's a lot to be learned from this case. I guess the question goes back is whether or not he should have been tried as an adult to begin with. All right, things have been a whole lot different in the juvenile system. But then again, it all came down to one factor, and that one factor is because murder 3, they didn't feel there was enough time for Nolan to be rehabilitated, because under the juvenile system, they only retain jurisdiction until he turns 21. So I guess they felt that, at that point in time, Nolan was approaching 14 or was 14 when that decision was made. So I guess they figured that 7 years wouldn't be enough time. But
A lot of the time you had talked about one of the witnesses and had kind of said that it was their responsibility throughout the day, or maybe their influence rather throughout the day. Do you think you'll take any action there, or?
I doubt it. I doubt they're going to take any action. No, what I was insinuating is that all 3 of these boys, all being friends, all being young, and I indicated during my closing argument, they all acted stupid. And when you put one boy's not, does stupid things, you put 3 friends, they're boys of this age together, their stupidity seems to basically, grow by leaps and bounds, exponentially, the stupid things that they engage in. And I think that's what happened. What I was talking about was the fact that they were all staying overnight at Mr. Miles Bellman's house. So, he was sort of I saw him as the ringleader. He's the first one that started pointing the gun at Kain and dry firing the gun at Kain. And hearing those clicks you hear didn't come from the gun in Nolan's pocket, like the prosecutor says. If you recall, when you looked at the video of Trooper Van Kuren, when he was dry firing the gun, pulling it back real slowly to show it, every time he dry fired it, what did he do? He slid the slide. You can't just click, 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 click while in your pocket. But what you can go click, click, click with is the BB gun, and it was Miles dry firing the BB gun. It wasn't the Kel-Tec 380 that they claim was in my client's pocket, which wasn't even in my client's pocket at that time based upon their own timeline.
Do you regret putting Nolan on the stand?
No, I don't regret it. He did fine, I thought. I mean, he got up there and told the truth. He told the truth. He told what he remembered. And like I said, this is a very traumatic event. I'm sure there's a lot of it he's sort of blacked out of his mind. And there's a lot of stuff that he doesn't remember. And he was truthful. When he said he didn't remember, he really didn't remember. I pressed him for answers too during trial prep. And, some stuff he remembers, some stuff he doesn't. And I can't say that, it's him being evasive or unintentionally answering the questions. I think he truly doesn't remember some stuff. It would have been a lot easier for him to get up there and say, no, I didn't point the gun at those girls. But he said, I don't remember. Maybe I did. That's him being honest. It's him being truthful. It would have been real easy to just say no, but he doesn't know. He doesn't remember.
The prosecution, in their closing arguments, implied an intent that, the whole, what would happen was an element of bullying, that he meant to shut Kain up. What do you?
Shut Kain up by shooting his best friend in the back intentionally.
That was
I know that was what they were implying, and I think that whole theory is a bunch of hogwash. That's just what they came up with. And here's the important part of this whole thing, okay? There was only 2 or 3 people there when this happened. There's only 2 people that are around to tell the story. And that's Nolan and that's Miles Bellman. And Miles' first impression and the first words that came out of his mouth via text to his friend, Julian, when he was texting after this is, it was an accident. Did he do it on purpose? No. That's what he said to his friend. Now, of course, that sort of changed over time. Well, I'm sure he's being pressured and getting influence from other people. But that was his initial impression to what had occurred. With no pressure, no afterthought, just his first impression was this whole thing was an accident.
But you painted him to be a liar in your closing.
Yeah, well, I think he did lie about some things. I know he lied about things. We admitted he lied about things. So me painting him as a liar was no surprise. Even he had to admit, he first told the police he never touched the gun. That was his words. Did you ever touch the gun? No, I never touched the gun. Then once his DNA got swabbed and he knew what was going to happen, then it's, oh, well, Nolan let me put the magazine in. And then it grew from there. Then it went from there to the point where not only did Nolan let me put the magazine in, I also handled the gun and I worked the laser. So yeah, he lied. Absolutely.
Were there times Nolan was untruthful?
Hold on. Still on. Perfect timing. Let them go a little bit. Were there times when Nolan was untruthful during his trial testimony? I don't believe so. No. I think he pretty much told the truth exactly as he remembered it. Whether it's accurate or not, that's to be determined, but that's how he remembers things happening. And he, like he said, he told you when he remembered, and he told you what happened, and if he didn't remember, he didn't have a problem saying, I can't remember that. And I'm sure, like I said, because of and this is traumatic for him too. This wasn't easy for him. I mean, it'd be traumatic if you shot a stranger by accident, let alone your best friend. So, no, I don't think he actually intentionally lied while he was on the stand.
What about the option to deny bail?
What about it?
How do you feel about it?
Must be a fire alarmer.
Yeah.
You guys might be running that way.
Yeah, maybe.
There's more coming. There's more coming. This is a big one. I think that might be it.
Okay. Let's hope.
Yeah.
What was the question about denying bail?
Yes.
What was your question about that?
How do you feel about it, considering he is 15?
I would have liked to see him stay out on bail. Was I shocked that the judge had denied him post-verdict bail? No, I'm not shocked at that at all. I mean, it maybe is for his best interest. I don't know. Maybe that's what the judge is looking out for. He's maybe safer in New York County Prison than he is at his own home. This has been a rough week for everybody involved. And you've heard the judge that he should have admonished the audience more than once about their behavior and what was going on between the two sides. So I'm not sure what the judge's rationale is. Do I like him being at York County Prison? No. But at least I know he's safe there. I know they're going to keep a really close eye on him because they're certainly not going to let anything happen to a 15-year-old in there.
Do you think there's anything that you could have done differently over the course of this trial?
There's always things, in hindsight, you probably would have done differently. I might have brought up the fact that you can't dry fire the 380 Kel-Tec weapon unless you pull the slide back every time and have to pull the pipe, just like you saw the Trooper Van Kuren do in his film. There's 100 things, you can second guess, but for the most part, I'd probably say not. And again, I think this whole thing came down to that very first question, because that's what I harped on. It's Nolan's, it was Nolan's mindset. It was his mens rea. It's what he thought at the time, okay? His frame of mind, what he saw or what he thought any risks were based upon what knowledge he had. And it's not like he had no knowledge like that case they relied upon. He did have knowledge. He racked the gun. In his mind, the gun was empty. And he never expected it. When that gun went off, I'm sure he was as shocked as Miles was when they were walking back there and all of a sudden they heard a loud boom. There's no surprise that Miles dropped his BB gun he had with him. Surprised they didn't drop their phone. He had his phone out too, I think, with allegedly with Mr. Harris on it. Whether he did or didn't, who knows, based on the timing. But that really doesn't matter. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.